You know, a lot of us reach for herbal remedies thinking they're a gentler, more, well, natural way to look after ourselves. We see that word natural on the label and our brain just automatically translates it to safe. But is that really the whole story? Let's dive into what the science actually has to say.
And that's the big question, isn't it? We have this gut feeling that if something comes from a plant, it can't possibly hurt us. But as you're about to see, the reality is so much more complicated than that.
And wow, this quote from a 2012 medical review just hits the nail on the head. Calling that belief a hazardous oversimplification, I mean, that's a pretty strong warning. It's basically telling us that we have to look closer to get past the marketing and our own assumptions. Okay, so let's start with the risks, because this is where that oversimplification can get genuinely dangerous. The biggest hidden danger often isn't the herb itself, but what happens when it gets mixed with the prescription drugs you might already be taking. So these herb-drug interactions basically come in two main flavors. On the left, you've got pharmacokinetic interactions. That's a fancy way of saying the herb messes with how much of a drug is floating around in your system. It could make it way less effective or way too strong. Then on the right, you have pharmacodynamic interactions. This is when the herb changes what the drug actually does once it gets to its target. The easiest way to think about it? One changes the volume, and the other one changes the channel. Both can cause big problems. And the absolute poster child for these interactions is St. John's wort. I mean, tons of people use it for mood support, right? But it is notorious for causing serious issues. It can mess with everything from antidepressants and birth control pills to critical heart medication and even anti-rejection drugs for transplant patients. It is the perfect and kind of scary example of why natural is definitely not the same thing as harmless. But of course, that's not the whole story. For all the potential risks, some of these remedies can have real, scientifically proven benefits. The trick is separating the solid facts from just folklore. And a fantastic place to start is with something many of us drink every day: green tea. So check this out. This chart shows a key finding from a 2025 study that looked at middle-aged and older men. Just look at the difference between those two bars. The group that had been drinking tea long-term reported way lower levels of depression. So the obvious question is, why? And this is where it gets really fascinating. The researchers actually mapped out how it works, and you can see it right there in that diagram. It wasn't just a direct thing. If you follow the arrows, you see that drinking tea led to less inflammation in the body and better sleep. And both of those things, in turn, led to lower depression. It's this beautiful little chain reaction. And the good news just kept coming. The same study found that the guys who drank tea long-term also had healthier body mass indexes, BMI, and significantly higher testosterone levels. So what we're seeing is this whole cascade of positive changes. But this might be the most exciting part of all. Take a look at that brain scan. Researchers found that the tea drinkers actually had more gray matter volume in certain parts of the brain. The implication here is just incredible. A long-term tea habit might literally help protect your brain and slow down some parts of the aging process. And green tea isn't just some random outlier. Let's look at another plant that's getting a lot of scientific attention for its mental health benefits: lavender. We've always associated it with being calm and relaxed, and now science is actually putting that reputation to the test. Okay, the proof is right here in the data from a 2020 study on older adults. Look at this. The group that drank lavender tea twice a day for just 2 weeks saw their depression score drop from 17.8 down to 16.3. Meanwhile, the control group, who didn't drink the tea, actually saw their score tick up a little. It's a clear, measurable difference. And just like we saw with the green tea, the benefits weren't just a one-trick pony. That same study showed that lavender tea had a really powerful effect on anxiety too. It lowered scores for both that in-the-moment state anxiety and the more long-term trait anxiety. So, where does all of this leave us? We've seen some very real risks and some very real benefits. It's pretty clear that the simple story of natural is always good just doesn't hold up. The reality is much more nuanced and, frankly, a lot more interesting.
All right, let's break it down. Here's the bottom line. First, and say it with me, natural is not a synonym for risk-free. We saw with St. John's wort that the interactions can be really serious. Second, benefits and risks can absolutely exist in the same plant. Third, and this is maybe the most important point, evidence is everything. Solid studies, like the ones we saw on green tea and lavender, are what separate real medicine from just wishful thinking. And all of that leads to one inescapable conclusion. You should always talk to your doctor or pharmacist before you start taking any herbal supplement.
Which brings us to one last thought to leave you with. We've only really scratched the surface with 2 plants here, but there are literally thousands of traditional remedies used all over the world. So as our science gets better and better at analyzing them, the really big question is, what other hidden risks and what other incredible benefits are just sitting there, waiting to be discovered?